They made their way 2/3 of the way down the hall to the apartment. Sue jingled the keys for a moment, searching for the one for the front door. She found it and slipped it into the knob and turned. It gave no resistance. The door had been unlocked all night. It slowly creaked open and the three of them stayed in the hall, looking into the apartment. "Everything looks fine," Rob said. "Yes, no demons," Sue said. "Now we just have to worry about burglars." They entered the living room and did a fast sweep of all the rooms to make sure nothing was missing, and to make sure no one was hiding in any closets. After they inspected Michelle's room, they breathed a lot easier. Everything looked perfectly normal in there. Even the dozens of little bottles of perfumes and makeups on the bureau by the door were all exactly where they had been before anything had happened. Nothing was out of place. The wall also looked just fine. The novelty of suspense wore off quickly after the search, and pretty soon they were sitting around comfortably, getting back into their routine. Sue and Michelle took their places on the sofa, and Rob sat on the floor in his usual spot, with his back against the sofa arm, watching TV with them. They were staring at early afternoon cartoons. They were all in the perfect mindset for such mindless entertainment. Rob was glad to see their tense body language relax. He hadn't even noticed their posture over the last few hours, until it went back to what it had been before all of it had happened. He hated that they had been dragged into it. He would not want to be in this with anyone else, though. He wished he could read their minds and see if there was any resentment on any level in there. He wouldn't have been surprised to find it. He had brought an invading force into their home, and no matter what they did or how easy it was to keep out, he knew they would never again be able to sleep as peacefully as they had before it had come. After a few hours, they all got their second wind. Actually, they were way past their second. Rob figured they were on their fifth for the day. Anyhow, they found the energy they needed to do the daily tasks they wanted to get done before there was no more day left. Michelle really wanted to use the printer at the library and asked if they would come with her. Sue said she would, but Rob said he needed to be dropped off at the bank to take care of his 401k. He wanted to cash it in. He'd already paid Michelle back for the hotel room in cash, and he was getting strapped. He wanted to be able to contribute more with the food and shelter they were providing. His own apartment was paid for through the end of September. He had dropped off that check after receiving the one his mother had sent. He'd had just enough funds. He also planned on needing cash for some other upcoming costs. He had been investing for almost 2 years, and, with the immediate withdrawal penalty of 20%, he expected to receive about $1,500. Cashing it in was a last resort for Rob, who had nothing for the future, but the last resort seemed to have arrived, or at least was on its way. Sue and Michelle didn't interfere with his decision. He was glad. They dropped him off in front of the Federal Savings and Loan and said they would be back in about an hour to pick him up. He walked through the glass doors and entered the stuffy building. It felt great just to be wearing jeans and a t-shirt in there. A coworker of his had coined a great phrase and said he was Gap for pay. Whenever he had been in his Gap clothes, he hadn't felt like he was even in his own skin. That false costume stripped him of any confidence. However, he was not an employee anymore. He was on the other side. He was the dreaded customer. He felt up to the part. He only had an account with that bank since it came free with the job. He couldn't get an account with any other bank because he was on check systems due to bill struggles in the recent past. He'd had an account with South American Bank, which had been overdrawn by $90 for a month. He had called their customer service line and said that he would have his $900 tax return deposited into the account in the next few days and asked if that would be okay. They had said that would be fine and he had plenty of time, but just to be safe, they would notate that on his account. He had hung up the phone, satisfied. A few days later, the IRS had sent him a notice saying that his financial institution had rejected their deposit, saying that the account had been closed. His bank had not notified him. He had found out from Uncle Sam. When he had called the South American Bank about this, they said it was standard procedure to close an overdrawn account after 30 days. He had asked why they had not let him know that. They had said they had sent him a letter, but he must not have gotten it. He had then asked why he had been told that everything was fine just a few days prior. There had been a pause on the other end of the phone. There had only been the sound of typing, and then the officious voice came back on and reported that there was no record of that phone call. Rob had insisted that they fix this problem, that it was their fault, and asked what they planned to do about it. The voice had said they would do some research based on what he had said and would get back to him. He had hung up the phone, dissatisfied. He had figured he would never hear back from them again, just their collection agency, or if he did hear back, they would of course say they had found the situation to be in their favor. He had been willing to pay the $90, but not unless he was removed from check systems. They had called him back 2 weeks later and said that they had found it to be their error. He had been shocked. The system wasn't screwing him. They had found the notation on his account on what they called a sub-screen. Unfortunately, he had lost his telemarketing job the week before and could not then afford to give up the $90. It took him another month to become employed again, and by then he had given up on it. The lady he'd talked to on the phone would probably not be reachable, if she still worked there, if she remembered who he was. It had been all the easier to give up on because his next place of employment had been the Federal Savings and Loan, and they had offered him an account along with the job. It turned out they used their employee accounts to keep tabs on if any debit card purchases were made at Disneyland on days where an employee had called out sick. Every employee had to sign a release of account information. Rob walked over to the investment representative's desk, which was marked by a sign hanging from 2 thin chains from the ceiling. His feet stopped and his stomach sank when he saw who was sitting behind that desk. It was Hank Swinson. He used to work in cubicle land in the back with Rob, but apparently the opportunistic bastard had stepped up a few rungs on the ladder. Hank had never done anything downright horrible to Rob, but he was still an extreme douchebag, and Rob had never expected to have to see him again. He was practically a best buddy of the scrotum eater who had fired Rob. They severely disliked each other. It was one of those things that was just understood. There was nothing more to it than that. They did not even wish each other harm, but only because that was bad for their own karma. However, if either of them happened to come into harm's way by accident, the other may have to suppress that giggling urge, but not out of discomfort. Rob wondered if Hank would giggle at his recent troubles. Rob put on a straight face. He knew the 2 basic rules in life. Don't fuck with people that handle your food, and don't fuck with people that handle your money. He had been both of those kinds of people, but he had still been fucked with plenty. He never had done anything about it, but he knew that a less stable person would have had a field day putting loogies and other bodily fluids on a burger, or selling and using all the private information that would just pop automatically on a computer screen, things like mother's maiden name, social security number, date of birth, home address, telephone number, etc., when someone would call their bank. That was not to say that he hadn't been tempted at times. "Hey, Hank," Rob said. Hank looked up from his paperwork, and Rob watched the recognition spread across his face. "Rob? Is that you?" Then without taking a pause, he added, "Nice outfit." Rob looked down at himself and shrugged. "Well, we can't all have those cool creases in our pants all the time." Hank looked confused and said, "Yeah. Whatever. I'm here to cash out my 401k. With the market like it is? I really need it. It's an emergency." "Well, I can't help you." "What do you mean?" "I mean Federal Savings and Loan has been bought out by U.S. Bank, and the accounts are frozen until the merger is complete." "What? Frozen? Well, when the hell are they going to be thawed out?" "We expect that within the month you will have full access to your assets. We won't be completely bought out until the beginning of next year." "That's great. I can't wait a month." "Well, we sent out notices. No one is even able to withdraw more than $1,000 from a checking or savings account per day right now," Hank said, sounding justified. "Fascinating. Well, I haven't gotten any notices." "Not my problem." "Oh, you bet your ass it's your problem." "Sir, I don't appreciate your language." "Sir, you're my age and we know who each other are. I'm telling you to get me my fucking money or get me somebody who can." "One moment, please," he said without separating his teeth. He got up to get the manager. Rob sat down in the empty chair facing the desk and said aloud, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." Hank returned with a middle-aged woman whose name tag read, Nancy Manager. Rob had never seen her before, but he was glad it wasn't his old manager, to make it seem like he was stuck in some cosmic joke. She gave Rob a quick, pursed look and said, "Is there a problem, sir?" "What? He didn't tell you?" "Yes, there's a problem. Your bank won't give me my money." "Sir, unfortunately the stock accounts are temporarily prevented liquidation for the merger updating." "I don't care. I just want my money. You have no right to withhold it from me." "I hear you, but I apologize. The stock accounts are frozen." "That's bullshit!" "Sir, keep your voice down. Blow me. Look, this is an emergency and I'm not leaving here without my money." "What kind of emergency?" "What do you mean, what kind of emergency? That's none of your business." "Well, there are certain circumstances in which we are allotted to retrieve funds for customers." "Like what?" "What's your situation?" Rob stood up. "I'm not playing this game, lady. You tell me what situations apply, and I can pretty much guarantee you that one of them will just so happen to apply to me." Nancy Manager crossed her arms and said in a raised voice, with Hank looking nervously over her shoulder, "Like a death in the family, or if you are moving, or, well, now you see? I just so happen to be moving, so now you can give me my money. Look how that worked itself out. Aren't we all so very glad?" "That seems more than coincidental." "How the hell would you even know?" Now that I know you can, Nancy Manager, why don't you run over to the vault and get me my hard-earned money?" He gave her his biggest, cheek-rippling, phony smile. Hank's face had started off with a smug expression when he had first walked over with his supervisor, like a man about to watch his pit bull do damage to a burglar. But after their tete-a-tete, he looked to be hiding from Rob behind her. When she huffily left to get the forms, Rob just glared at him. Hank blushed and walked away after her. "Stupid fuck," Rob murmured. Nancy Manager returned shortly with the paperwork. "Where's Hank?" she asked him. "I don't know. He said something about needing to shoot up heroin in the bathroom and then he took off." She thrust the forms at him. He took them gently, with that ridiculously huge smile, and set them out on the desk. He bent over to fill them out. She stood over him while he was writing and motioned to the security guard to watch him. Rob completed the paperwork quickly and messily, but correctly. He mostly just had to fill out personal information and check the appropriate boxes. Then he handed the forms back to her. When he was done, she said, "We don't normally do this, but if you can calm down and stay calm, I will go ahead and cut you a cashier's check now." "That would be nice. Thank you," he replied. She walked behind the counter and went out of sight again and took a little longer to return the second time. Rob didn't mind waiting. He knew what he wanted was getting done. She finally came back and presented him with the check and looked so pleased with herself. "Thank you. I need to deposit it now into my checking account. Can I do that with you?" he asked. He'd heard Hank's news about the daily withdrawal limitation, but he wouldn't be needing anywhere close to $1,000 a day from his debit card. She let out a sigh. "Don't get all pissy, Nancy Manager. It's just Nancy." "No, it isn't. Not really. Now is it?" "What?" "Never mind. Just look at me, though. I'm being calm. You have to be calm, too." She just looked at him and blinked. "A piece of paper is nice, but it doesn't do me any good until I turn it into money." He was having a little fun. Fuck 'em. Why not? She took the check back with exaggerated gestures. She went behind the desk, typed on the computer, scanned the check, and slammed it down in front of him. "You need to endorse it." "Oh, with pleasure," he said, and signed it. "Here you go." He handed it back. She stamped it and snippily asked, "Anything else?" "Nope. You have just been an absolute angel. You have yourself a great day now, Nancy Manager. You hear?" She looked so much more tired than when he had met her. He was glad. He walked towards the exit. As he approached the security guard by the doors, he turned around and shouted into the bank. He shouted to a full line of people. He shouted to the tellers and the managers. He shouted to Hank and his buddy old pal wherever he was. "This bank fucking sucks! They don't even exist anymore. They've been bought out and won't give you your money unless you say you're moving or someone died. So be smart. Say that. Take out all your money." The security guard walked towards him. "See ya, motherfuckers!" Rob raised both arms and gave the bird with each hand. He turned and left before the security guard got to him. Before the door slowly and softly shut behind him, he heard the ruckus beginning. He heard an employee yelling to someone, "No, only the stocks are frozen." Then he heard the deep voice of a customer yell, "What? My stocks are frozen?" Rob smiled as he walked to the bus stop to wait for Sue and Michelle.